Welcome to Akathisia Stories, a podcast from MIST, the Medication-Induced Suicide Prevention and Education Foundation in Memory of Stewart Dolin. MIST is a nonprofit dedicated to raising awareness about akathisia, a medication-induced disorder that can cause suicide, self-harm, and violence. Our mission is simple: increase education and save lives. So, hi, everybody. Welcome to the Akathisia Stories podcast. I'm your host, Ivan Kaiser, and we had a special episode for you guys today. So, today is Wednesday, July 15th, 2026, which happens to be the 16th anniversary of Stewart Dolin's passing. So, as most of you guys might know, Stewart Dolin was the late husband of MIST founder Wendy Dolin, who we are so happy could join us today for the Akathisia Stories podcast. And also here today is the director of MIST, Jenna Sackman. So thanks again, guys, for joining us today. Wendy, so our listeners might know, you and Stewart were high school sweethearts. So I think it's safe to say you knew him very well. Would you mind kind of taking us back to that brief period right after his passing? What did you initially understand about what happened? And when did you kind of find out about akathisia after that?
For the first month after Stewart died, the whole community, his law firm, everyone who knew him were in a state of shock. I always tell people if 1,000 people would end their life by suicide, Stewart would be 1,001. So the first month was a blur. Nobody knew anything, but unbeknownst to me, one of my friends was doing her research and talked to a law firm, went through the intake process, and this wonderful gentleman said, akathisia killed Stewart Dolin. So it's about a month and a day after Stewart's death. I'm walking my dog and my girlfriend calls and says, akathisia. And I'm like, what? And I remember writing it down. I couldn't spell it. I didn't know anything about it. But that night, in fact, I looked up the article. I looked up GSK suppressed data on Paxil-induced akathisia. And then it was one of those moments where, I was so struck by this. And then I looked up what was on the website early on about akathisia and all the precursors to akathisia. His, restlessness, his pacing started to make sense. So I didn't learn about akathisia until about a little over a month after he died.
So, Jenna, you had known Stewart really since you were a child. How did finding out about akathisia impact you?
Yeah, well, similar to what Wendy said, it was just kind of an explanation that explained what happened to Stu. As everyone else, I struggled with understanding, how this could have happened. Stu was always such an optimistic and calm person, a calm presence. So learning that a medication could, cause such a torment and agitation was both very eye-opening and obviously heartbreaking, but helped us understand what happened.
And then this is a question for both of you. And I guess, Wendy, you can answer this first, then I'll go to Jenna. But what was most shocking or unexpected as you began researching medication-induced harm?
What was the most shocking was that it was hidden, and was most shocking that it wasn't well known. I'm a therapist. I went back to social work later in life. And being an older student, I read all the, supplemental reading and all the extras. I had never heard about akathisia. And then to hear what happened to people with akathisia, it was just heartbreaking. It was one of those moments where, how do you just sit with that information and not do anything? It was just, you just can't hide drug trials. You can't hide side effects that ultimately leads to people's deaths.
Yeah, I agree. That healthcare professionals and consumers were both very unaware. People that were prescribing the medications thought they knew maybe about the medications, but were not informed appropriately. So misunderstanding the symptoms, misunderstanding how to really provide informed consent. And then also, I was surprised after we started, hearing from people how many families were affected by this without having a word to put to the name, not being able to advocate for themselves because they didn't know what they were really experiencing, and neither did their healthcare provider.
And what would you say, Wendy, were kind of your initial goals when you founded MIST, and how have they kind of evolved over the last 15 years?
That's a great question. I mean, I think we wanted to educate people about, stopping, starting, change the dose of any med. It could lead to akathisia. But I think it was just kind of more narrow. I can't explain it. And over time, because we were hearing about all these other meds and because we were, reaching out more, it just kept growing where it almost took on its own life form. And I think that for Miss, where we were kind of focused just local conferences in the Chicagoland area, we started to expand and we took every opportunity we could, like the Learning Disability Conference or crisis management or counselors or alcoholics, anywhere that there could be people could learn. So I think the main thing I see different over the 15 years is just how broad we've become, how extensive it is.
Kind of from that point onward, because another thing I'll mention is this year is the 15th anniversary of MIST's founding. So Jenna, from your perspective, how has MIST changed, in terms of its reach and its impact?
I'm impressed every day and really proud to be part of MIST because, I mean, what started as this grassroots organization to really honor Stewart's memory and raise awareness about something we were passionate about and that was little known has become an international organization that educates all sorts of, consumers. We've expanded our reach to healthcare professionals, advocates, students. So I'm really proud of the impact we've made over the course of many years. One thing I also like, we're part of the conversation that healthcare providers are understanding we need to have about medication safety. And MIST is a trusted resource to this conversation. People look to us for information and, trust in us to provide experiences and yeah.
Yeah, one of the great things about MIST is that we offer so many different educational resources and whatnot, including 2 courses, free courses you can take online, Akathisia 101, an Akathisia kind of misconceptions course. So what are some misconceptions about akathisia? And these courses are offered for free to anybody. But can you kind of describe what those courses kind of cover and who they're designed for?
Yeah. I guess they focus on recognizing and preventing and responding to medication reactions and specifically akathisia, for consent and prescription practices, being, how are we prescribing safely. They are designed for key audiences of healthcare professionals like emergency responders. Healthcare professionals can also earn continuing education credit through taking these courses, and then apply the resources directly to their clinical practice. We also offer courses that just apply directly to the general public so that everyone is able to kind of benefit from the information, whether it's clinical or more just objective information.
Beyond the courses, what other forms of education or outreach has MIST developed? Whether it be podcasts like this one, or conferences, or professional engagements and stuff like that.
Yes, as you mentioned, many. We do try to meet people wherever they are available, and we know where. So we try to reach and have a broad way of reaching our consumers. So yeah, we have our podcasts that are featuring people with lived experiences. We are invited to many conferences, presentations at educational sessions. We collaborate with universities and different organizations that, tackle certain or similar areas that we do. We also do like to have the courses continue to work on engaging with healthcare professionals in different ways. Yeah, and we have a comprehensive website that is also a great resource to learn more about akathisia, learn more about myths specifically.
So, Wendy, if someone suspects they or a loved one might be experiencing akathisia, either after they've gone, the one on a website and took the course, or even if they just looked it up on them on their own, what should be kind of the first steps that they take?
Well, I mean, I've thought a lot about that. Like in the case of Stuart, it happened so quickly. There
Mhm.
really wasn't anything that could have happened. I mean, there was someone on the train track who saw someone pacing like a polar bear and, didn't intervene, but, I understand that. The mission of MISS says, talk to your doctor, call 911, or go to your nearest emergency room. I think that that's an area of mist, which I don't want to say it's controversial, but it's hard. And it's hard in the sense that many of the people experiencing akathisia have had more than one drug and they're afraid to go to the hospital because they're going to be given more medications. But at this point, other than calling your doctor, other than, 911 in the emergency room, I think that's really the alternatives for right now.
What roles do you think clinical trials kind of play? Clinical trials and pharmaceutical disclosures really as a whole play in like shaping the public's understanding about some of these risks.
Well, that's a real slippery slope. Before
Mhm.
I started Mist, and I eventually sued the drug company for hiding akathisia, and I won in the lower court. Um, the I was under the impression, and this was my lack of awareness, I thought the FDA did the drug trials and then they approved it. What I found out subsequently was that the pharmaceutical companies do the drug trials. They submit it to the FDA for approval, but there's something called the revolving door policy where people from the FDA go to work for a pharmaceutical company and the pharmaceutical company goes to works for the FDA. And
Mhm.
so I would hope they'd be transparent. I would hope they would be diverse, and I hope they would report things in the drug trial. During the original Paxil drug trials, I believe 20 people ended their life by suicide and 40 more became akathasic, and they didn't report it. So I'm a little leery about drug trials. Yes, don't get me wrong, medications save lives, I get that, but I don't always know how in depth, I should say, the process is. How many, when I was in Washington, D.C. once learning about drug trials, not all of them are diverse. Not all of them
Mhm.
have different ages. And so it's kind of hard. I mean, there's a lot of leap of faith here that the drug trials are working out. And then the second thing is I feel very much the doctors are very much the victims too.
Mhm.
Doctors receive something called the Dear Doctor letter. And in the case of Paxil, they were advertising it as the next best thing for sliced white bread for anxiety. Turned out there was an 800% increase in suicide. So the doctors, they don't do the drug trials. So in many ways, I think that the doctors are as misinformed as consumers.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting how many different people we've seen at different conferences. I mean, I know I've only been to two conferences now, but I know you've been to many. But just hearing different healthcare professionals come up to us and say, "I didn't know this, I didn't know that," um, and a lot of them not even knowing about akathisia, or maybe they heard the word, but they didn't really know exactly what it means, or like Christina pointed out, before they might get it confused with tardive dyskinesia. So it's definitely just about kind of spreading the word and getting the awareness out and whatnot. So yeah, and so we have been to many different conferences. How has the conference feedback kind of changed over the years?
I think the conference feedback has changed because we're getting more and more sophisticated. Our
Hmm.
booth is just incredible now with so much information. But I think what we've all tried to do now is we're shifting how we talk to people when they come up to the booth. And I'll say to them, have you seen the commercials on TV? Do you see when it says may give you suicidal thoughts? And I said, what it is akathisia. In fact, as you know, our new campaign is let's call it what it is. So when you look on TV now, I mean, just any night, all these medications, suicidal thoughts, it's akathisia. They just don't want to say that. And I think that has really hooked people in because they will say, you're right. And then they share more and more people share their stories. And I think that's been a big shift.
And what challenges remain in kind of raising awareness about akathisia?
I think, the challenges are, for an organization like MIST is simply based on money. I mean, we're very grateful for our donors. We do quite well. And we get a lot of, publicity and all that. But for example, my fantasy would be that during Suicide Awareness Month, we would have a 1 minute, informational moment saying this is akathisia, but that's a whole different thing. But I think that just keep on doing things and just, new videos, more courses. I think that that's really just a challenge. And we're now going to be doing a campaign in Australia. So just that kind of a reach, just more of what we're doing. We stay very close to our mission, education and prevention. And so we take more and more opportunities to do that.
And so, Jenna, as a director of MIST, what key things would you wish that prescribers and consumers understood better about akathisia, and what kind of factors could improve current prescribing practices?
Yes. First, I think just knowing how serious and what akathisia, like how serious and life-threatening this adverse effect can be and how to treat it as appropriately as possible. And also that it's not just psychiatric medications. This can be any medication. So just being aware. For prescribers, I would say obviously knowing what you're prescribing, knowing the risks and the benefits, telling your patients those
Mhm.
things, and also always being in touch with your patient, especially when they stop or change the dose, and listening to the patient if they do feel different, if something comes up, consider it akathisia. Consider that in one of the ways that could be describing their symptoms. For consumers, informed consent. There is knowing why they're taking the drug and what to look for, not to take the drug. Like there are benefits, and to just know the benefits and the risks. Obviously, keep in touch with your healthcare provider, and that buddy system of telling a family or friend is always great, if you're able to do that, so someone else can kind of advocate for you if needed.
And this question is for both of you guys, but I'll start with you, Jenna. So, kind of looking back over the years, can you share some moments that have been particularly meaningful, either personally or regarding MIST's impact?
Yeah. Some of them, I mean, there's been many meaningful moments. We've had a lot of different, especially for me, a lot of firsts of, from our education to our events that we raise fund, right? Like our fundraiser events. But I think it's like the families who tell us that, like, we've helped them. They were either the families or individuals were either able to recognize they had akathisia, recognize it in someone else, have unanswered questions answered. So being able to provide any kind of comfort or help to those families that have suffered has definitely been very meaningful. I also think being part of the conversation for healthcare for providers, obviously that's a huge impact if that's part of their conversation of like, could it be akathisia? That's part of our hope of getting this into the medical field, and being recognized. And then obviously, to honor Stuart's memory, of course, this is he will always be missed, and it is always a loss, but through our mission and our efforts, being able to save others and honor others, I think, is what's most meaningful at the end of the day. So that's
Hmm.
what I guess really hits home.
And similar question for you, Wendy. Any meaningful moments or memories that stand out for you personally these past 15 years with myths? Maybe something at a conference, maybe something you heard from someone talking about akathisia, and any special memories about Stewart you'd like to share?
Well, I think the thing that drives me is I remember Stuart came home from his very first day of law school, and I think it was in, torts, so I'm not a lawyer. And he said, he talked about to me that he was deeply disturbed about the concept of the price of doing business, and that he was really himself upset that, that people could die, but that's just the cost of doing business. So I think that echoed in my head and kind of was a motivational force. But I think the moments, and there's so many, but Christina Kaiser, who is the director of education at MIST, we were asked to present at the Royal College of Psychiatrists in London, not knowing what we were going to expect. And I think just walking up the stairs and being in front of like 500 people who, in many cases, we knew more than them. And several doctors came up to me and said to me, "Why do you know more than me?" So that was a really important moment. And there's so many. I think that just the extent of MIST now, a lot of organizations that are formed to honor people kind of fizzle out. I think, I don't know the statistics, but it's probably pretty close to about 70 or 80%. And what's impressed me is the staying power of MIST. And I think the staying power of MIST is we are constantly evolving. When we first did the conferences, we were just focused on antidepressants and antipsychotics. And now it continues to grow and grow and grow. I think I'm also impressed that through Shared at MIST, we hear literally from people all over the world. And to have that kind of acknowledgement and gratification when we do our awareness campaigns, we've done it internationally. So I think that's another moment. And I think my favorite moment probably of all is we were at a conference and a woman comes up to me, running up to the booth, and she goes, "I was here last year knowing akathisia, you helped me save my client's life." So there's those moments, or talking to people in the military who were given so many meds. I just think I'm amazed at the impact and how many people experienced this and didn't have a name. So there's too many highlights over 15 years, but there's so many memories of making a difference, which has been so gratifying.
If you had to pick one thing that you're really excited about kind of getting into the rest of this year or next year, when it kind of comes to pushing MIST kind of out there, what are you looking forward to
Yeah.
the most?
I think I'm looking forward to another new video. I'm looking forward to more podcasts from you. And I'm particularly excited about the Australian campaign because I believe we're going to be on TV. So I think it's that's a deep reach.
Mm.
But as you know, the Board of Best and all of us, if we're not doing 10 projects at a time, I don't think we're doing enough. So it keeps on going.
Is there anything else either one of you would like to share about kind of your outlook on how MIST is doing, what you're excited about in the future, or any other memories of Stewart?
I'm just excited to continue our mission to honor Stu while our reach is beyond just that initial, memory. He is our motivation, and so it's nice to be able to remember him and help others all at the same time. And I'm just proud to continue to be part of such a great organization.
On a different note, Jenna used to call Stewart King Stu.
Yes.
So there was her relationship with him.
Yes, we were very close. I was a kid when I met him, so amazing memories of Stewart for sure.
And Wendy, is there anything in particular you'd like our listeners to know about who Stewart was as a person?
He was just an amazing guy. I mean, very laid back. I mean, it was very kind of very funny, very high on life. He was athletic. He loved to do things. He was an amazing, amazing father, husband, friend, colleague at work. And I think that for me, what makes this important is when we think of suicide, we want to think of just some mentally ill person who had financial problems and ended their life. And I think what we have to realize is suicide is like cancer in the sense that there's many forms of cancer, there's many forms of suicide. And unless we are considering, a death that occurs after someone stopped or started a change of medication, we're not teaching people well. And I think we need an expansive view. And the thing is that most of the people that I know who have experienced akathisia, most of them were assigned meds for just what it is to be human. Anxiety, test anxiety, insomnia, that sort of a thing. And I think that we just have to understand how akathisia affects people.
Well, thank you again so much, both of you, for joining me today for this very special episode of Akathisia Stories podcast. And until next time, take care.
You've been listening to Akathisia Stories, a podcast from MIST. To learn more and get access to free educational resources, please visit mist.co. Together, we can increase awareness, prevent tragedies, and save lives. At MIST, we are all for truth and disclosure, honesty in reporting, and legitimate drug trials. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.